And good morning. This evening, BBC Television provides a treat for those who think that all foreigners are funny and that anyone with a false French accent is good for a joke. Tonight, some 17 million people will tune into BBC One for the start of a new series of Allo Allo. But of course, the series does more than just make fun of foreigners. It also follows the fortunes of a group of French resistance fighters whose comic antics deeply offend some of those for whom the events are more than mere history.
And what did you do in the war, Grandpapa? I was sewing a lady's silk knickers to a torn balloon so that the British airmen could escape.
Oh, have you not finished that balloon yet? Soon the restaurant will be full and this place will be crawling with Germans.
Don't move. Now listen very carefully. I shall say this only once. The basket has been woven by the weavers of Wimarrow.
Forgive me, I do not have my code book. What does that mean?
Exactly what it says. The basket is ready to be attached to the balloon.
Ah, good.
René, customers.
Oh, heck. Look, you must be out of here in 10 minutes,
Oh, Michel, we have not repaired all the holes in the silk balloon.
We shall require one more pair of silk knickers.
I will give my last pair for France.
Remove them behind the curtain. There is a man present.
Do not worry. I have seen it all before.
But a very long time ago.
No, just a moment ago when I dropped my needle.
Well, as I said, around 17 million people watch Allo Allo regularly, and no wonder. But despite that, many other people find the series offensive, often because they themselves were involved in the war. We'll be talking to some of those in a moment. But for those who support and enjoy the show, it has taken on almost a cult status. Let me introduce you to the members of the Allo Allo fan club from Bell Broughton in Worcestershire. René, are you enjoying your day away from Edith?
Yes, I am indeed. Of course, it's nice to be away from a whining voice and singing.
And what about Yvette and...
Yvette is running the cafe. Someone has to be in charge while I am away.
You're not missing Yvette and Michel?
Oh, very much.
Her flick. Are you really as nasty as he's made out to be?
I try to be.
You try to be. How does that manifest itself?
Well, if Elga burns the toast, I will torture her.
You torture her?
Yeah.
With a Birmingham accent?
Yeah.
It's a German Birmingham accent. Yeah. What form does the torture take?
Ooh, I will make her sleep under the bed and I will sleep on top.
René, what else do you... Where do you actually practice your accents, your French and your German?
I don't actually practice them very much, as you can hear.
Oh, you're not doing too bad. And the costume, where does that come from?
This is the wife's. The rest is mine.
Before you started all this, how did it start?
It all started basically about 12 months ago. We, two or three of us started watching the programme, and it just grew from there.
How many of the... Which were the two here?
These are the basic 3, 4.
Yeah. So how many have you got now altogether?
Oh, there's over 50.
50? And you all dress up in... You would normally be in uniform now?
That's right, yes, we would.
Tell us what the uniforms you'd be wearing.
Well, Flick had been his leather Gestapo coat. Scooby here would be in his general.
What part do you play, Scooby?
I play Lieutenant Gruber.
And what do you do? Tell us. Do an imitation. You've got Barry laughing already. What does Lieutenant Gruber do? Come on. It's a talent spotting day.
Yeah. Well, he chases after Vinny.
Where do you actually perform? Where do you dress up like this? Just in the pub, or?
Just in the pub.
Yeah. How do people react to you?
Well,
you're wearing a German uniform in the pub. How do people react to you?
Well, people who come in, obviously, I think it's a bit strange at first, like, but as I say, they come in, they've enjoyed it. We've done our own video in there and recorded it all ourselves, and it's gone down well. It's been great.
People don't take offence or they don't object?
No.
No.
Not ever once?
No, we
not
haven't
ever.
offended anybody.
Not that we
We've
know
taken
of.
it in the sense it was meant to be done. Which is a fact.
Barry, why is the series so popular? What's its appeal?
Well, it's first. I don't think that the key thing is that it does anything about the French resistance. It's actually parodying another BBC series, Secret Army. I think that the whole point of it is that it's one television show parodying another television show, and the attitudes created in the serious one, The Secret Army, are being parodied in Allo Allo. And I think people in Britain love parodies. They love
That's very subtle. I'm not sure I was aware of that.
No. Well, it's...
I just see it as a straightforward kind of mimicking of whether it be a Frenchman or a German officer or RAF officer.
But it's fado-farce. I mean, it's fado-farce in the 80s. And what the Parisians were laughing at in the 1900s, we are laughing at very similar comedy today. And there was a film based on a fado play, Oda Paradiso, on television recently, and that was terribly popular. I mean, people were laughing at speech impediments and all kinds of unpleasantness in the life of Parisians, written by a Parisian for a Parisian audience.
But can you understand that there are elements in the series, in the show, that actually do offend other people?
Oh yes, of course I can.
What would you identify as the part that would offend them?
Well, obviously, if you have personal experience of the Gestapo, however well played the character of Herr Flick is, you're not going to enjoy that because the memories of the reality are going to be so horrific that you will not find any imitation amusing. That seems to be the key factor.
Yeah. Well, let's find out. There are people here who are vehemently opposed to the Allo Allo series and what they depict. Bill, you feel quite strongly about this, don't you? Why do you find it so offensive?
Well, Barry's already mentioned something which I think introduces my comments. I'm not vehemently opposed to it, but I happen to have been the technical advisor to Secret Army. I was also asked to go on the Allo Allo team as a technical advisor. Now, I don't understand why the BBC have set out deliberately to send up the Secret Army. The Secret Army was a splendid program. It had good audience ratings.
But this isn't the Secret Army, is it so much?
No, but let me come to the point. I identify myself very much with people. Having done the two, seen this program and done the other one, I find that people who have seen the Secret Army and have identified themselves with it, these are people on the continent in the main, in the Netherlands, in France and in Belgium, they recognise that the BBC was at that time paying respect to them. In a way, congratulating them for their valour, for their bravery and so on. They now see Allo Allo, and they again identify themselves. This time they're identifying themselves in the most ridiculous way.
All right, is there anyone else who feels vehemently opposed? Nopberg, you do?
I feel very vehemently opposed, and I know I should get lots of flack from the opposition. And I shan't be saying it only but once. I should say it many times.
Mm-hmm.
I am a public speaker. I was 4 years in the Austrian resistance, and I have given talks since 1963. And I have always, after the talks recently, been addressed with regard to this Allo Allo. And Robert, if you could hear the comments, they're absolutely incredible.
What specific, Nopberg?
The
What is
people
it?
objecting that the young people are indoctrinated with such a silly program, because let's face it, it's absolutely stupid.
Give me an example of what it is you object to.
I object in particular to the air crews, the British air crews.
To the British air crews.
Now, to portray them as nuns, let's face it, and in pantomime costumes as cows to be milked. Well, you can't go any lower, gentlemen, can you?
Barry?
Yeah, well,
It's
yes,
offensive to the British air crew that were shot down over France, Germany during the war.
Robert, I've seen air crew shot down right away. I've seen a navigator. In fact, I rescued him from a burning Lancaster. And this man was anything but funny. And the Gestapo who came for him, or should I say the officers who came for him, there was nothing funny about the colonel, what you portray, or the daft aid he got, that Hans. There was nothing funny about the German officers. They were brutal, arrogant and cruel in all the countries they occupied.
Barry.
Yes, yes, of course they are. I mean, nobody's doubting that for one moment, but what we're not talking about, something that is pretending to be real, any more than the farce of Feydeau pretended to be real Parisian life. Or any humour has to be tasteless in a curious way before it gets any effect.
The point about this, Barry, is that the lady is talking about she's direct first-hand experience and a horrific experience of real people being treated badly. She's now offended because she's seeing a modern world portraying them in an hilarious, in her terms, offensive manner.
Yes,
Shouldn't we respect that?
Well, wait a minute. At what level do we see Kurt Waldheim?
I know.
You're an Austrian. How do you regard Kurt Waldheim? Now, wait a minute. We're talking about taste. I'm sorry?
We're not making a farce of Kurt Waldheim.
But in 20 years' time, we may well do that.
Well, I hope not. It seems to me that none of the people over there can, obviously, unless they're older than they look, can have any idea of what the occupation was like.
No.
I've spoken to people who experienced it, and it was cruel and desperately... it was a matter of life and death in those days, and I don't think that you can make a joke, you can't have a farce about life and death of ordinary people.
Well, let's note that the fan club aren't on trial here. It's not, you're not the script writers and you're not the actors, but you've heard a couple, we'll hear more, no doubt, of the way in which people feel. How do you respond to that?
Well, so
Flick.
I agree with them, like, you know, things that happened during the war obviously were nasty. It happened to the English, the Germans, the Jews, the Russians, everybody. I'm not taking that away and trying to say that it was a joke, because it was far from it, but we're just doing a bit of humour, light-hearted humour. We don't want to offend anybody, we're just portraying what we find is funny.
Sean, you're a TV critic. Are these criticisms justified?
Well, I think I've lost this argument already, because 2 years ago I wrote the most unfavourable review I've ever written of Allo Allo when it started, and it promptly went to the top of the ratings. So I think if I really ought to come and say I love it, and perhaps I'll take it off. But
what's your real position?
I think I'm slightly different from what's being said here, because I think humour can cover anything. I think you can be funny about anything, and I think where Barry's a bit evasive, I think you've got to be. Forgive me. I think you can be funny about something, and deal with the subject, but then you've really got to deal with it. I think the problem with Allo Allo is it's sort of pretending that life in resistance France was like Heidi High or Dad's Army, and it actually wasn't like that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, please.
Sean says you can be funny about anything, but I find funny when you talk about racism, you make racist jokes. That is the most subtle form of racism, and it just leads on to more things. They are based on ignorance, and so how do you argue that?
Well, humour's like anything. It's a tool, and it can be used badly, and it can be used well. But I think humour in itself, to say that you can't be funny about something, I don't think that's really the problem.
Well, let's talk for the moment on Allo Allo. Anybody else feel strongly about Allo Allo and the way it did? Yes.
Yes, I do.
Arrived with you dead on cue, didn't I? You put your hand up at the right moment. Why?
Well,
what
as I
upsets you?
told you before, I come from Holland and we had 5 years hard suffering. And I have seen my father kick down the stairs because I put on the 31st of August 1940, 30 children of my age, all 15, school included. All the same thing happened. I don't speak just for me here. And we put a little jam jar with a candle for Queen Wilhelmina's birthday, who was here in London. That was about 8 o'clock in the morning when I switched that on. About 1 o'clock I had lunch with my father. I can see it as this day. I had, by the way, lost my mother just before the war. 2 German SS came in. We lived in a flat, mind you. The doors had to be all open, that was downstairs. But kicked our flat door in, went to the window, slipped, mine, on the floor. My father was done 51. 2 of them took him under their arm, like this, Rolf! Now, father slipped because, as I told you, the door was kicked. It is really, he had still his serviette on, therefore he could not see well. They kicked his head before they took him down. The stairs. He was half unconscious, really. The blood was coming from his face. I just say that. Anyway, he had to be there for 24 hours.
So
in the Euterpenstrasse, of the head office of the SS. He came back. I was then only a girl of 15. Naturally, I was screaming my head off when he went. When he came back after 24 hours, he was exhausted. 2 of his nails cut to the wick, apart from his inches to his back, where he was kicked, and his head, what was most. But frankly, you must understand, that is a very impressive age as it is for a girl of 15.
Yes, I mean,
then what
let
did
Barry
I...
respond. Let Barry respond.
No, I mean, there's no point as anybody who's supporting Allo Allo taking one iota away from the bravery and decency of people who suffered through the war. And it's reasonable to remember, I also lived through the war. I was 11 when it started, and I lived in London throughout that time, and I am very well aware, because my family were very, as they used to say in the old days, politically conscious before the Second World War. And don't forget, the British ambassador in Berlin in 1936 said of the Nazis, this country is now in the hands of dangerous hooligans. Now, if we had laughed more at Hitler and Goebbels and Goering and Himmler and Streicher and the rest in 1934, 35, 36, 37, there would have been no World War II. It's because we...
Rubbish.
I've never heard such nonsense in my life. All this programme does is trivialise a situation which these ladies have explained very clearly, and that contributes nothing. You can make humour out of a funeral, but it's very distasteful. I think it's very much a generation thing. I can't understand. I watch it, I see it, I turn it off. I can't be bothered with it because it is so trivial.
But we've got other people who... We talked to resistance fighters who are very offended. We've got war widows too. How do they feel about what is being portrayed on?
No, it doesn't worry me. I would like to say too, surely Londoners didn't have very much to laugh about, but nobody had a sharper sense of humour once the bombers had gone home than Londoners, and I think it was their humour that carried them through.
What was your husband?
He was a soldier. He was lost to the Japanese, I'm afraid. I never knew what happened to him.
But you don't find anything offensive or distasteful?
No, I don't think it's meant... It's not malicious in any way as far as I can see.
Did you put your hand up too?
Yes, I had a brother that was in the RAF at the Battle of Britain, and he was shot down, and I had a brother at Dunkirk. Now, they both think the programme is very, very funny, and so do I.
You have no objections to
None
it?
at all. I mean, Dad's Army I thought was very funny. A lot of people object to that.
Well, we've got people here from the RAF as well, haven't we? You're from the RAF, yeah?
Yes.
How do you...
Well, actually, I'm a member of the RAF Escaping Society. This society was formed by 2,500 airmen who helped to escape during the war. In total, we believe there was something like 25,000 people in Europe who helped us in this endeavour. Since the war, we have done our best to look after these people who helped us, and in their memory, I find this programme is a little bit over the top. It parodies it too much, whereas I think that if they'd written a programme less of a parody, but taking the humorous aspects of the individuals who participated during the war, you could have made a far finer programme which would certainly have been less distasteful to the people here.
Get a younger view.
Yeah, I'd just like to make the point that as a younger person watching Allo Allo does in no way lessen the horrors of the war and the horrors of the Nazi occupation that I've learnt about. I think it's a comedy, and it's acceptable as a comedy, and would no way influence me to think of it as serious or as of the Germans anything like they were. It's a complete satire. I would just disagree with anyone saying that it's influencing me to think that the Germans were less horrific and terrible as they were.
So it doesn't colour your attitudes or anything?
No, in no way.
I must say it doesn't colour my attitudes either. My mother was a war widow, my father was killed during the war, and I find the show hilarious, but I can understand that people have very strong, very deep, very sensitive feelings. Paul Taylor, why do they feel like that? You're an academic, you've researched these issues.
Could I sort of go back a little bit, Robert?
You can do what you like, Paul.
What surprises me is that the gentleman over there who I understood was going to be in Nazi uniform isn't. Now, I would have thought...
Oh, I think that's technical problems.
May well be, but
Yeah.
I would have thought some of the people sitting close to you at the moment would have been deeply and justifiably offended.
had you sat there in Nazi uniform?
I must admit, I felt that myself, and I wondered how people would react.
Yeah.
Did our friends there say that they wear them a great deal locally in their pub, and they're not? But that's not the reason today.
Yeah.
The reason today is there have been technical problems with their costumes.
I accept that.
But how do you respond to what's being said?
I would actually agree with Sean French, who I haven't met before, independently to the same conclusion. I think there are any number of subjects you can cover in comedy. You can cover the most dire subjects, not at the level of farce or at the level of fado farce, as Barry Took says, as Allo Allo does. You can have comedies about funerals, about cancer, about handicapped children.
Well, we do, don't we? We have comedies about the disabled, about the mentally ill,
We do.
about funerals.
But
Why do we take a particular exception to this?
I think the main thing is lots of the comedies that are, say, about the disabled have a substantially higher quality of writing and perhaps a higher quality of production. I couldn't say a higher quality of acting because Allo Allo is obviously...
It's not them that's doing it.
It's not them that's doing it, but they are gifted actors.
To continue the point that the gentleman over there made, I think we're sufficiently educated to understand that the war was not like that, that our education says and it tells us of the horrors, and that we are not indoctrinated by the programme.
Bill, there's a young voice. There's a young girl who's saying, I know all about the war, I'm not indoctrinated, the programme doesn't make me think any less of people like you and my own father and the contribution that they made. She still has the same respect, reverence. What's the problem?
Yes, I think my version of the problem is not particularly what the British think of it, but more so of what all our great friends on the continent think. Look,
Bill, we don't make television for...
I was shot down, and I was one of the 3,000 lucky, fortunate Bomber Command chaps that came back. Now, my life was saved by people on the continent. People that you are now sending up on this programme, they look at the programme and they do not understand us. They do not understand this particular British sense of humour.
Barry, are we being insensitive to our friends in Europe?
Yes, we are, but how many French half-hour situation comedies have you seen lately? How many German situation comedies have you seen? They don't make them. The reason they don't make them...
We've got some French people here. Let's hear
they
what
don't
they
make
say.
them because they do not share our sense of humour. It's neither a good thing nor
Yes,
a
we
bad
do.
thing.
Let me up. Yes, we do, he
Hello.
says. Yes, we do.
Yes, because...
It's not your sense of humour, I'm afraid.
Yes.
You speak for yourself.
Let the Frenchman speak for himself.
Well, to me, I don't watch the programme as a programme on war, a comedy on war. I watch it as a programme making fun of French or German or even British.
You're French, you live in Britain?
Yeah, I am.
But you watch the programme?
I watch the programme, I like it, yeah.
You like it?
Yeah, I
You
like
laughed
it.
at it?
And I understand it as well.
I did look and your accent is real?
Yes, but yeah, it's not my BBC French accent.
It's not your BBC French. The lady next to you.
I'd like to just make a comment. I think that this issue of people with their talking about the vengeance against the Germans, this show apparently was made for a little bit of joviality in a sense, and I think we should look at the programme as that. I mean, we know how these people have suffered. I mean, we've had families that have suffered, but this programme is made for, as you say, a little bit of humour. We don't get very much in this.
It's a hard world we live in, and a bit of light.
Humour in this
and
world,
a light
and
touch
therefore
doesn't hurt
I think
now and
all
again.
this should be forgotten, and we just look at the programme as a, not in a
Not
sense.
forgotten.
No, I don't
Not
mean.
forgotten.
I don't mean in the sense of forgetting. I mean this.
Well, let us make that clear. Go on.
I don't mean forgotten. What I mean to say is when we see the programme, we look at the programme as what it is.
We shouldn't take it seriously.
That's right.
And
yes.
it's no way reflecting
No
our views of the
reflection
brave
at
men
all.
and women who
No.
fought in the war.
No.
I'm a German living in London and maybe the worst expert to talk on this. When I first saw this program, I really couldn't believe it. I mean, on German television, you would never in 1,000 years, or at least not today, have seen something like that. But I have to admit, I enjoyed it.
Hang on, you can't have 5 conversations going on here, you know.
When I saw it, I enjoyed it and maybe felt guilty a bit about doing it. So it wouldn't run on German television, I'm absolutely sure, but somehow I enjoyed it on English television. That was my position.
Well, we're talking about comedy, in particular Allo Allo, and the way in which it depicts the resistance, the RAF, and indeed French men and women during the war, and whether or not it's offensive and in bad taste. James Hadley, you have great contacts with the French. What's your experience of the way in which it's actually perceived in France, or what does it do to French-British relations?
Well, Robert, if I may just first of all add that also I was myself in the war. I was also in the RAF. I didn't get shot down, thank God, but I was also in the Far East, and therefore I cannot actually comment too much about the European aspect. But I think I'd like to take up, if I may, first of all, an assumption made by a lot of people that the French themselves would necessarily find a program like this offensive. If I may, I'd like to go back to a point that Barry made, and when he referred to Feydeau and so on, because this was something that was very much in my mind. One thing I think we ought to bear in mind, I hope I don't sound terribly pompous, the English always remember what they see, and the French remember what they hear. Therefore, I suspect that a program which is farcical in the British sense of our sense of humour, I'm thinking of Brian Rix and their trousers falling down and all that sort of thing, is not something which the French are themselves particularly attuned to. And therefore I suspect that there could well be a lack of understanding in what to the French would seem a rather unsophisticated comedy, but to us a very genuine comedy in a true farcical.
I've got to go back to a Frenchman, haven't I? Is there another French man? Or you don't understand our sense of humour. You realise that?
Well, I've been here 18 years, so I have learned to live with it. But I can
Is it
see.
that bad? When you
let's put it this way, it's different.
In what way is it different?
Oh, I can't tell you. It's all subtleties, unfortunately. But
we're more subtle than you.
I'm not saying, but subtleties are different. Let's put it this way: the emphasis is put one way in one country and in another, and it is difficult for us when, of course, as French citizens here, we feel that we are mocked. But I can see, as a third generation, we have to live together, and humour is a link between one generation to another. So, with great respect to war, resistance, and people who have survived the war and lived through atrocities, you have to have, I think, the BBC or other medias, the right programs to keep it all in perspective. We have to pay our respects and dues to these people. And the youngs have said they haven't forgotten, thank God. And my children, I hope, they're both French and English, so they have to live with it as well. And we have to, I think, if I put a word, think about Europe, and humour will take us through it, I hope.
Well, that's a lovely thought. Let's hope that it actually works. But it's not just, of course, foreigners, is it, that are the butt of our humour? It's also race as well. Cliff, you got into Rabbi Cliff. Yeah. You sound worried that we're coming to you. But there are problems also, aren't there, with humour and you got into difficulties. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I did. I'm quite fascinated by what's been going on here. I don't think... I mean, the kind of humour that got me into trouble wasn't racist humour. I wasn't actually poking fun at anybody. I was seeing humour in moments that other people were finding quite serious, and I think that that's a different kind of...
Can you give us a brief example?
Yeah, I mean, the one that everybody read about in the papers, a young girl on her way down from the pulpit tripped up after she'd had a sip of the wine. And I just diffused it by saying, well, you know, one drink and she's anybody's. Back she went to her seat, and half the congregation were extremely offended.
I think you've got about 50-50 there. I'm not sure
yes,
everybody
that's right.
was actually... But you got sacked as a result, as a rabbi, as a result of telling those kind of jokes.
Yes, I mean, I wouldn't describe it as telling jokes, but as for having that kind of humour, yeah.
Does anybody find that kind of humour offensive? Barry?
Not at all. If I may, a quote was told to me by a very ancient and revered psychiatrist, psychoanalyst, who was herself analysed by Sigmund Freud. And when, after a lot of pressure from Britain, the Jewish Sigmund Freud was eventually released, the Gestapo said to him at the frontier, would you sign a paper to the effect that you've been well treated? And he said, I'll recommend you to all my friends.
Well, let's
now,
see.
that coming from a man very late on in his life who understood a great deal about the nature of human beings, perhaps more than any man that's lived, I think it's a pretty good joke.
Let's get a young reaction.
I'm Jewish, and I actually find that joke very offensive because I go to a Jewish school, and we learn a lot about the Holocaust. Though I never lived through the Holocaust, I feel what people who did go through it have been through, and I find jokes, especially for me personally, Holocaust jokes, I find very, very distasteful. And anyone who suffered from the Germans will find that distasteful. I think, how can someone make a joke about 6 million people dying? I mean, you personally didn't make a joke about 6 million people, but people did suffer from the Germans, not just Jews, black people, homosexuals, gypsies, anyone who wasn't the German race.
But do you feel that every time that anybody makes a joke, the war is going to be very difficult, isn't it, if all those subjects are prohibited?
No, I don't think they have to be prohibited, but I don't think you should have to make a joke about them. I don't think a black person would find most black jokes very offensive.
You know, I've sat here.
You got into trouble as well, haven't you?
Oh, no, I didn't get into any trouble. They didn't see me. The lights were out when I left, so they couldn't see me. And I was wondering, you know, all these lights, they're going to bleach me before we finish.
Absolutely.
However, you know, I've listened, I've sat here and I've listened, and I get up on stage and I tell jokes. I tell jokes about blacks, Jews, whites, or what have you got. And all I do, I get on stage, tell these jokes in order to make people laugh, make people happy. This is what it's all about, is to make people happy, not to rebuild or remind them of what went on before or what's going to go on later on.
But Chalky,
and I think it brings us together better.
Nobody is doubting yours or anybody else's sincerity or the writers of Allo Allo. Nobody's saying they're going out of their way to make us unhappy or miserable. What they are saying is they are insensitive. You should understand that people have deep, real feelings. Now,
well, we do. You know, people like me who get up on there do realise that people have deep-rooted feelings.
But you've got into trouble, haven't you? Now, to give us an example of what got you into trouble.
Well,
for your humour.
I don't think I really got into trouble. I think somebody wrote in and said he's racist because what was the joke I told about a Pakistani? Now, if I don't tell it, you certainly can't be able to tell it, surely, would you? I mean, the Race Relation Board would be down on you like a ton of bricks. So, I mean, I've got to tell it. Let everybody know.
He's trying to make people happy, and he's making a few people laugh now.
Yes, I think the point at issue is that Jewish people get persecuted. As a Jew myself, I know that Jews get attacked for being mean, and what actually happens is that jokes about Jewish meanness or about faults about different races, different sexes, actually trivialise all that, and they allow it to come out into the open. And the worst thing about it is, I think it's even worse than trivialising it, they legitimise it. And I think that is what I find offensive. With regard to what Cliff said, I don't personally find Cliff's joke, which he told from the pulpit, offensive. I think it might be perceived as sacrilegious, and he might have been sacked as a result of that. But it's not a racist joke, it's not an offensive joke. But I do find all racist jokes offensive.
But the trouble with this is, of course, we're all stereotypes, aren't we? The British are, the French are, the Germans, the Jews, the Pakistanis,
Robert,
the black Chalky.
I mean, I get on stage and I say, I'm a Jew. I've got a big nose. Fresh ears free. That's why we're Jews. I mean, why should anybody get offended over that?
Would you be
Not many people laugh.
Would you be offended if I were a member of the National Front and telling anti-black
No.
jokes? Well,
I wouldn't be offended over that. I think everybody's entitled to make
one at a time.
Why?
I mean, sometimes when
we're in a
bricks through
multiracial
that
society at the moment. Everything should go. You should be able to talk to me. I should be able to talk to you without being offended of what you say or what I say to you, or vice versa.
Yeah, but jokes can represent hatred, can't they, and violence? I mean,
well, if you're looking for the hatred, I suppose you'll find it there. If you're not, if you're looking at the joke as a joke,
let's get
that's how you'll find it.
We're going to have somebody else from the back. Go on.
Well, I think it depends on who tells the jokes. Like, if a white person made a joke about blacks, they'd be offended, but you get Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy, who make jokes about blacks.
Why? Why can't I make a joke about? I'm not racist. I'm not anti. Why can't I make it? Why can't I make exactly the same joke as Chalky and you not resent? If he can make the joke, I can surely.
But that's how people feel.
But is that how you feel?
I do as well. Yes.
So you'd feel more offended if I made a racist joke than if Chalky made one?
Yes.
What about a Jewish joke? Would you find that a Jewish joke is just as offensive if Cliff makes it as if a Catholic makes it?
Because if I think it is quite an important point. If you think about some of the sort of jokes that, say, Woody Allen tells about Jewish people, I find that quite sort of interesting, quite sort of, it's almost like he's sort of relating some of my experience as a Jewish person, and it's not offensive because it's from a certain sympathy and there's a certain warmth there. But I've sort of suffered these sort of jokes throughout school about Jewish people being mean and, I don't know, washing their toilet paper again or something like that. But the key thing is that you're not allowed to sort of, you're not allowed to say that was racist because everyone's laughing around you, and, you know, it's all quite a big joke.
But you're saying it's hurt you.
Yeah, it's certainly
Throughout
been
your
very
school
offensive.
life, you've been
Yeah,
hurt by
yeah.
those jokes, which the rest of us just take for granted and.
I mean, the first time I was hassled as a Jewish person was when I was 11, when someone told a sort of a joke, a Jewish joke, and I just didn't know how to handle it. Everyone was laughing around me, and it's a very, very offensive.
Okay, I'm trying to get as many people who make a contribution, who haven't made a contribution before, to do so now.
I'm the secretary of the Royal Air Force's Escaping Society, and I know that most of the members, of which there are about 350 members left, are ashamed on behalf of the BBC when this program went out first. We had many, many telephone calls. I myself was in France during the war, and people who are born in Britain will never understand what these initials RAF and BBC stood for, what they meant to us. They were the lifeline for all of us. They were looked upon, they really are engraved in people's hearts. I know this sounds sentimental, but it is absolutely true. They are not just initials like RAF, BBC. They mean something. And I feel that on behalf of our helpers, I can only say that the BBC has let us down.
René. René,
like to
speaking for the BBC on this occasion.
Well, I'm not speaking on behalf of the BBC, but...
Well, it depends what you say.
I'd just like to know if the association the lady represents was equally as offended by programmes, as somebody said up there earlier on, like Dad's Army, like Hogan's Heroes, like MASH,
let him finish,
etc. Well, I can't think of any more off the top of my head.
Well, all right, Barry, are there limits to what we should do with humour? We've had several complaints with it's Jews, Catholics, French, Germans, RAF, resistance. Are there limits to what we should do?
Just before I try to answer that, I must say that the point about the Freud joke is not an anti-Semitic joke, because I was illustrating the man's bravery.
Anti-Semitic, but it was...
It wasn't to do with the Holocaust.
But let's go
it
on.
Was to do with
But let's not get involved in that one now. That's something you're going to have to take up.
I mean,
would you draw
with great
lines
respect to
about
the young
what
man,
we
it's a foolish... I was talking about a very brave man making a very brave statement in the face of grave danger.
Fine, Barry.
And the thing that is essential about humour, it illuminates and it diffuses and it helps us to live more easily through our lives wherever we are and with whoever we are.
Paul, are there limits? Are there areas where you say are taboo?
I think certainly, yes. I disagree with Barry to some extent, though there's a fair amount of agreement. I've always understood a joke to be some kind of shortcut to consensus. If you tell a racist joke, all the racist assumptions underlying that joke are immediately tapped into. So if I ask Chalky, for example, what's red with wheels? And he doesn't know. And
He doesn't know, obviously doesn't know.
I say...
The London buses?
No, it's a whip nigger.
Oh, wow.
Now,
that went down like a lead balloon.
Which it was meant to.
Sean, are there limits to our humour? Or is the point that one of the...
I've never seen a red nigger anyway.
What are the young men...
I didn't know there was one.
The point that one of the young men made there, that it doesn't really perhaps matter so much what you're saying as the manner in which you're saying, or as the gentleman up there said, who is saying it. Is that important?
I'd agree completely. I think there are no areas off limits.
So
the trouble
nothing's
is
taboo.
that jokes are fantastically revealing, and they show the attitudes behind them. I mean, I think for the gentleman over there to equate Dad's Army and Allo Allo, it seems to me to illustrate the failing of Allo Allo.
Yeah.
I listen with amazement. I'm a member of the British Limitless Ex-Servicemen's Association. All of my members are disabled. A lot of them spent time in prisoner of war
Are you going to
camps.
watch this programme?
Which one?
Allo Allo, tonight?
No.
You're not? Well, he's not going to watch it. 17 million people are going to be watching it at 7:35 tonight. I don't know what you're going to do. The decision is yours. I'll be joining them. But whatever you do, have a good weekend. Take care of yourselves and each other. See you on Monday. Thank you very much.